everybody. Welcome to another episode of Allure of the Poor, sponsored by Dracaena Wines. I am your host, Lori, a UC Davis winemaking graduate, Spanish wine scholar, WSET Level 2, and some other stuff. Every time I get bored, I go back to school. But today I have a special guest with me, Joe Nielsen from Ramsgate Winery. And he kind of has an interesting path to the wine world, one that I don't think we normally hear. So welcome, Joe. Thanks for coming on.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So let's talk about that history. You grew up in Michigan. And although I know there is wine in Michigan, you don't really hear too many people coming from Michigan to make wine in Sonoma. So how did we get to this path here?
I like actually how you started it. I kind of grew up because I'm still not quite there. Yeah, I'm from Michigan. The wines coming out of that area are unique and special and are arguably world class as well. So a shout out to those who are still making wine in Michigan. There are still plenty. So went to Michigan State University. Originally wanted to be a doctor, but I really didn't know, as many kids don't know when they start going to school. It's an argument for traveling the world a little bit before you make a decision, for those who are thinking about it. But anyhow, I decided I wanted to be a doctor. I was really in love with the idea of traveling the world, being sort of like a doctor without borders, doing something like that. And then kind of stumbled upon the enology viticultural program that was starting up at the university at the time. Michigan State, for those who are not familiar, is another great agricultural school, much like UC Davis, for a very long time. So there's a beautiful horticultural plant science program that's been there for over 100 years. And just kind of kept seeing different parts of those programs popping up. I like to be outside. I didn't really still know what I wanted to do with my life, but anyway, my two different things sort of happened. My mom continued to push me to not just take courses that would get me closer to a pre-med undergrad program, but to have a little bit fun in my life and not take myself too serious. So that kind of was in the back of my mind. And then also one of my really good friends in college told me that he just didn't see me as a doctor. And I was like, oh, that's,
Thanks.
sounds a little bit like an insult. But anyway, I was like, okay, then what should I do? He's like, you're going to do something fun with your life. You're going to be a winemaker or something. And it's like, where did that come from? But so it was kind of like multiple things. It's sort of like fate. And stumbled upon the enology viticultural program that they had just started at Michigan State. Fast forward, 17, 18 years old, ended up planning a little bit of a research vineyard for myself and my parents' home. And
because every child does that. Every child plants their own research vineyard.
Exactly. For my 19th birthday or 18th birthday, I had asked my mom for en-row stakes for my vineyard, our post en-row post. And then still kind of thought, well, I'll be a doctor. I'll have a passion for this. And then maybe someday when I'm at the end of my career, maybe I'll like that.
You froze there. You froze there. You said at the end of my career, and then you froze.
Is it good now?
Yeah.
So at the end of the year or end of my career, maybe somehow I'd still have this as a passion. I do think forward pretty far of my life, but that then seemed ridiculous to myself, that why would I wait 40 years to enjoy something that I seem to be interested in right now. So kind of slowly shifted all of my class schedule to things that involved grape growing or winemaking, and eventually switched my whole major to, at the time, they didn't have a 4-year degree with it. So it's a horticulture degree with an emphasis on enology and viticulture. So that's what I ended up doing. Fast forward, probably another little bit of time went by before I even had a glass of wine for the first time in my life, and tried wine. So I only say that because a lot of people get into wine because they had a great bottle of wine somewhere. I got really into grape growing first. I love the concept. I love being outside. I love thinking that you could grow something that is a multi-year opportunity or struggle. Not barley. It's not something that you can replant and it'll just be there next year. Something that you really had to sculpt over a long period of time. So anyway, then had my first glass of wine. I wasn't 21, but just like, wow, this is terrible. What did I get myself involved in? Thankfully, it turned out to be just not a great glass of wine, so it didn't ruin me for the rest of my life. 19, I went down to New Zealand to kind of get involved in the wine business while I was in between semesters. Helped out at my university, and then afterwards, when I did turn 21, jumped right into the wine industry. So been in the wine business since I legally can buy wine, and haven't looked back much over the years of wanting to do anything differently. Right after school, moved to northern Michigan, where I started making wine in Leelanau Peninsula, which is for everyone that knows the state of Michigan, it's up here, Pinky. Really enjoyed it, but I think at the time I was very impetuous. I was very much wanting to know everything, learn everything, experience everything. So I felt like I needed to see another part of the world. Thought I would come to California or Oregon or something like that to kind of get that sort of appetite fed, and came out in 2008 and thought it was going to be a temporary thing, and that's 2023. So here I am.
Time just flies when you're having wine.
Yes.
And now I read that actually you had to petition MSU because you weren't old enough to be in the program.
Yeah, initially they said for the winemaking part, you needed to be 21. And I'm like, well, that seems ridiculous. Like, why would I wait my whole college career to start? Like, I'm in a hurry. I don't want to wait until I'm 21 to start this. So initially it was, well, you can't do the wine tasting, you can't do the wine appreciation, you can't do the like actual chemistry parts where you're dealing with alcohol. So it wasn't like I had to, stand in front of a jury to really fight to get into the program, but I definitely had to push a little bit to get that going. So started growing grapes in my backyard and just kind of said, fine, I'll do it one way or another. I'm really excited about this and I want to do it. So eventually they were like, fine, you can do this, but we need you to behave yourself and do not, if we go on a field trip, you're not allowed to taste anything. So I convinced them. Whether or not I behaved is a whole nother question.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah. Did you agree to the no sipping?
Yeah.
I'm spitting, it doesn't matter.
Right. So yeah, initially it was, I started school really early. I was 17 when I started undergrad, and so I was
that's what I was thinking. I'm like, if I waited till I was 21, I was ready to graduate when I was 21. I turned November of my senior year was when I turned 21.
Yeah,
so.
same. Yeah, I'm a fall baby. So most of my career, college career was under the age of 21. So it was
Interesting.
interesting. I know UC Davis and Cal Poly and other universities do not have that stipulation. So
So how long have you been at Ramsgate?
I will be almost 5 years in June at Ramsgate. Time does fly.
And how did you find your way to Ramsgate? Is that your first place in California, or did you work someplace else and then come to Ramsgate?
Yeah. So I got to Ramsgate via Maryvale and Napa, followed by a long stint with Donald Family Wines, nearly 10 years there. So will be 17th vintage coming up for me.
Wow. Wow. Excellent. And do you remember your very first vintage of your actual first vintage that you were the head honcho for?
Of course. At Donald Wines, I was the 2013 vintage, was my first year as a head winemaker. And yes, I think you always remember those early moments. I don't remember everything, but I made arguably good wine, wines that I'm proud of.
Awesome. So let's talk about Ramsgate a bit. Like, what's the history of the winery and what's with the name? How do we get there?
Sure. The brand started in 2011. So relatively a young brand, but we've got a lot of vintages under our belts now. And I think we know who we are and who we want to be. The name comes from both Ram is loosely translated from Carneros in Spanish to Ram. And then we're one of the most southern wineries in Sonoma County. So we are sort of the self-proclaimed gateway to greater winemaking, our wine country, and thus Ramsgate.
All right, you're the gateway. And how large is the winery?
We're pretty small in terms of wine production. We are in a big vintage, maybe 12,000 cases,
Okay.
but 12,000 cases, not too big. Big enough to experiment, but small enough to do it ourselves.
And how many? So today we have Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, and Pinot Noir. Do you make any other varietals other than those three?
Yep. On our estate, we also grow Pinot Blanc. So our brand's about a third from our estate, and the rest we work with growers around Sonoma and Napa. We also make Syrah and Cabernet. And with the Syrah, if you start making Syrah, it's like giving a mouse a cookie. If you make Syrah, then you might as well make some Grenache. And if you're going to make a little bit of Grenache, you ought to make a little bit of Mourvedre.
Absolutely. And hey, happy Syrah Day today.
Yeah.
Right. So let's talk about this Sauvignon Blanc, because I know, like, you're basically a cool wine region. And so I knew Chardonnay, I knew Pinot Noir, but Sauvignon Blanc is a cool climate wine also. So let's talk about this. This is your Carneros Estate Vineyard Sauvignon Blanc, and it is a 2020. So there it is. So tell us about the Sauvignon Blanc. What do you like about Sauvignon Blanc? What don't you like about Sauvignon Blanc in the vineyard?
I don't think
Maybe you love everything about Sauvignon Blanc in the vineyard.
Yeah. I mean, for 2020 at Ramsgate, so Sauvignon Blanc is something that we grow here on our estate. It's the only one of the few products that we are 100% estate with. 2020 marked our first vintage of full organic farming. And for those who don't know, it takes multiple years of farming with those principles before you can certify. So 2020 was our first vintage. We've now completed 21 and 22, so we are now working on our certification. So 20 is an important year from that perspective. Is when we really committed to that change. It was the beginning of a drought in California, so we had less water. Concentration was quite a bit higher, but as a result, yields were quite a bit smaller across the board for all the wines that we're going to taste today or talk about. But delicious wines nonetheless. The Sauv Blanc is broken up in two different clones. One's a Muscat selection. You asked me what I like about Sauv Blanc. I think a lot of people assume Chardonnay is a variety that can be highly manipulated and or is neutral in a good way. I feel like Sauv Blanc can really also follow a similar trajectory where depending on how it's fermented or how it's grown, it can really influence the resulting wine. So Sauv Blanc is one of the varieties that I got interested in first in my wine appreciation. Partly, I think it was New Zealand Sauv Blanc was accessible to someone that was young with very little means, but then kind of enjoyed the wines of France. So for our Sauv Blanc, I'm sort of inspired by Bordeaux Blanc. I like barrel fermentations for Sauvignon Blanc. This wine has about 10% new French oak with 20% stainless steel and then the remaining in neutral barrels. Sorry, itch. For us, we like to ferment all of our white wines in small vessels. So even though there's some stainless steel, we do use small vessels. And the idea there is we like to pick with naturally high acidity, keep the wines fresh, but using surly and the opportunity to stir later on to kind of sculpt the palate is important to us. So that we like to have that variable. And so as a result, I do ferment everything in small vessels. Then élevage is 5 to 6 months. And typically most of our white wines are coming in under 14% alcohol. So kind of picking based on flavor and acidity and less so on potential alcohol. And for my particular palate, that tends towards slightly lower alcohols.
Awesome, fantastic. And now you had mentioned that you have your organic, or you're working on the organic certification, but you're also farming sustainably. So I think there's a lot of confusion between organic farming and sustainable farming. They kind of get thrown hand in hand because I think a lot of wineries, if you are organic, you're also being sustainable. But how would you explain the difference between organic and sustainable?
The difference is just it's kind of layering on things. So I think it would be hard to be not sustainable and organic, and maybe that's impossible. But for me, it's sort of the journey in farming. Sustainable. There's actual certificates that kind of validate that you are farming or practicing sustainable methods. There's parameters that need to be met. And then there are people that would argue that just thinking about organic isn't taking into account all of the things that influences sort of a sustainable business and sustainable agriculture. So to me, they're both very important. We're in Sonoma County. Sonoma County had an initiative, I don't know exactly how many years ago, but last time I saw it was about 99% of the grapevines that are in our county are certified sustainable or being farmed sustainable. And for me, with my initial degree in horticulture, I've always had an affinity towards plants and grape growing. And beyond that, just from a personal perspective, always really have taken organic as something that I would like to work towards with what I consume personally, but also as a profession. So at Ramsgate, gosh, sorry, some allergies. At Ramsgate, I came to our facility and we were already CSWA certified, so California Sustainable Wine Alliance. And looking at the requirements for that, there's quite a list. But I was also thinking with our site, with our wind in Carneros, with low vigor that we experience from a grape growing perspective, we also get less weed pressure. That this was something that I wanted to look at. Organic certification can be expensive just with the practices. It's a little bit more costly. There's more passes that are required with tractors. So I was trying to be practical and also sustainable in that regard. Can we do a lot of the organic farming without seeing a huge impact to the bottom line? So we started transitioning in 2019. We started using sheep in the spring, which we actually have on our property right now as our first mowing. That's beyond organic. That's not required by either sustainable or organic. It's just a nice option. We also decided as a team to stop using herbicides completely. So there are organic options for controlling weeds. But for me, it's still, is there a way to work around that? So is one better than the other? No. I think they're both important, and it really is site specific. And I'm not going to say that everything needs to be organic, but for us, it is a goal to become organically certified.
And you said that you're like 1/3 estate. So the other vineyards that you're working with, are they organic also? Or some are, some aren't? It's more concerned with your estate.
Yeah, the organic is concerned with the fruit that we're growing ourselves. I also think preaching to other people to do something and for us to have not done it first or have done it with them, I think is unfair to a degree. So kind of going through the motions myself and understanding the impact that it has both from a capital standpoint and just time was helpful. I didn't do it just for that reason, but again, Sonoma County is mostly sustainable anyway. So I would say all of our growers, in fact, yes, all of our growers are some level of certification in the sustainable programs that exist. Not everyone's organic, very few are organically certified at the moment.
I have a tendency to believe that many vineyards are practicing organic sustainability practices, but just aren't going for that very expensive actual certification. That, they're doing it for the practice, but not necessarily for that certificate that they can hang.
Totally. And I think there are some items that are available in the sustainable certifications that are not organic. And those are sort of areas where people just want to have that as a option in the event that we have a wet spring or a wet summer. And it comes down to practicality. Do you want to potentially have an issue without a solution? And I think that's why a lot of people don't. And I think to your point, most people I've met in this business are thoughtful. They own the land or they operate the land. A lot of people are very careful about what they want to add. There's very few people that want to add more than they need to. It's also just, I'm sorry, having some really
bad allergies.
But anyway, a lot of people are practicing, I would say, majority organic principles with a few items that are not.
And so if we go back to your estate, you're growing the Pinot, the Chardonnay, and the Sauvignon Blanc. You said you're growing Pinot Blanc. So do you have two completely different lines? So are you also purchasing, let's say, Pinot Noir, and then that's a different line at Ramsgate?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So Sauv Blanc, Pinot Blanc are 100% estate. We do not buy Sauv Blanc or Pinot Blanc from anyone else. And then we have an estate Chardonnay and an estate Pinot, which you have with you. Those are the only products that are items that we 100% grow and make and bottle as is. We have different tiers in our business. We have single vineyards that we partner with growers around Sonoma County and in Napa. Those are separate completely. And then we also have a Sonoma Coast labeled wine that may have some of our estate wine in it, but it's blended with other things as well.
All right. Well, let's get to it is now officially 12:25, so I can drink. So let's get to the Chardonnay. So this is your 2020 Estate Los Carneros Chardonnay, and this is not released yet. You're just getting ready to release it.
It's going to be coming out, yeah, this summer.
So awesome. So let's talk about this Chardonnay. Give us a little backstory on the fruit, how it's processed, everything that you do with it.
Yep. So we've talked about 2020 being kind of a pivotal year for us from a grape growing standpoint as a business. And the yields were very small. So for our estate Chardonnay, it's one of our more recent plantings. So we have a lot of different little clones that go into this. It's majority Wente from 3 different little blocks around our property. Our property is 150 acres and 27 of which are planted to grapes. Of that, about a third is Chardonnay. So it's Wente followed by Robert Young, a little bit of Clone 98, which is Dijon selection, a little Mount Eden. And then to round it out, we also have some Prosser Clone Chardonnay or Clone 15. Each of these we try to ferment separately. So I always believe in deconstructing a blend first, even if 99% of the time things are blended back together. This gives us an opportunity to kind of see how the clone interprets the site a little bit differently. We can pick them at different times, look for good freshness, good minerality, and then also matching oak with a clone or a site. But here it's like a cuvee within our estate versus just saying, oh, it says estate Chardonnay. We can press it all together, ferment it together, and then we're done with the wine. So that would be much faster. We prefer to deconstruct and constantly learn from each little component, even if it's a half a barrel or a barrel equivalent of wine. It's way more fun for me and my team to kind of see how these components come together over time. At Rams, something. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, what's the oak regimen on this?
It's about a third new oak. I work with French oak at the moment. Something that we really enjoy is sort of a deep dive in artisan barrels. In France, there's been a real resurgence of small production barrel makers. So working with some producers that only make 300 or 400 barrels a year, a couple thousand barrels a year, compared to some of the bigger houses that make a couple million barrels a year. So to me, it's an artisan product from day one all the way through. Most of the people we work with are quite small. And for that, it's not just for the artisan piece of it, is because they're so small, they can kind of tailor how they make barrels for you instead of saying, this is, you know, here's an extra large t-shirt. I don't care if it doesn't fit you. That's all we have. Instead, we're getting a little bit more of a tailored approach to how we use our barrels. What we're trying not to do, and I'm really sorry that you're not get my allergies under control. Anyway, so it's something not only in our estate Chardonnay, but something that we are trying to do with all of our wines. It's basically a vetting process that will take many, many years, but trying to find the right barrel for the right wine with the right toast from the right forest, so that it sort of brings out the personality of our wines without overdoing it. In 2020, we also over vintaged our Chardonnay to allow a little bit better integration, a little bit more of the site coming forward. Down in Carneros, we're mostly clay soils, very different than some of our partners in Russian River. I find the fruit to be very delicate, very kind of spice driven. We are very
There's
close.
cardamom.
Yeah. Thank you. That's one I actually compliment to me. I don't know if that's That's a spice component that I often get in our Chardonnays and our white wines in general. Some cardamom, sometimes chai spice, we have chamomile. Just to me, a really pleasant wine. But the fruit itself seems to be pretty delicate. So being patient, trying to find the right combination. In this vintage, we just felt like a little bit more time in barrel was going to be helpful, which I think was the right decision. We try not to make wines by recipe. Each vintage, we evaluate the needs for ML or not. There's no, this is how we do it. We try to respond to the vintage in real time. If the wine or the vintage feels a little more acidic or more fresh than we need, then we will put more wines through malolactic. It's not a requirement from my perspective. And then over time, we're also evaluating new oak, and as we dial in that new oak percentage and or new oak use, we hope the wines become more expressive and more personality driven with time.
It's the spice is beautiful, and it is kind of a, the fuller bodied. It's not, it's not completely full. I would go medium plus on the body, but there's a silkiness to the finish that just allows it to linger on your palate a bit more. What would you like to pair with this? If you're taking this home and you're eating, what do you like with this?
I mean, right now I like that wine so much that I would just want to enjoy it with a glass of just as it is.
With another glass?
Yeah, with another glass of wine, partner with a follow up. That's a good question. It is, what I like about that wine is it's relatively low alcohol for California standards. There's plenty of freshness, but there is some nice weight. And I often get that from Carneros in general. That's this juxtaposition of weight and freshness that I find appealing. But I think still getting, I would go seafood and something. We have a chef on site here that pairs with our wines every day. So right now, I think with some scallops and sort of like a beurre blanc sauce, but scallop sounds very good with that wine personally.
Yeah. It does have the body of it. Everybody's like, oh, you should be the pairing. Yeah, I'm horrible with food pairing, mostly because I don't eat 99% of the food on the face of this earth. But I think it can hold up to a thicker sauce like pasta type thing because of that palate. That it can cut through something with fat in it. So I'm thinking that way. But it is lovely on its own also. But to sit with some cheese, I think it would go nice with some, not the out of the world strong cheese, but like a strong, kind of on that stronger side of that cheese, it would go nice. But it also would go nice with the lighter cheese. And I think that's the benefit of having this kind of palette to it, is that it can go with a diversity of things.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So now your estate vineyard itself actually is kind of within 3 of the AVAs. You're part of the Sonoma Coast, Carneros, and Sonoma Valley. So how it's all just lines that somebody years ago designed or whatever, but
Yep.
how do you see these 3 AVAs coming in to make your fruit unique?
It's a good question. For us, we have a lot of different influences, and I think that's why the AVAs are important for distinguishing and helping consumers figure out what they do and don't like. For us, we do have 3 AVAs that overlap. We have Carneros region that starts on our western border. We have Sonoma Valley that ends on our southern border, and Sonoma Coast that ends on our eastern border. So we do have the influences, the coming together of a lot of different aspects that makes our site unique, and that's partly why I like growing grapes here. So with where we're at, we're in the southeast corner of Sonoma County. We get a very strong influence from San Pablo Bay or San Francisco Bay. And if anyone's been to San Francisco, they know fog and cool temperatures all year round. So that plays well for us in the wintertime. So we are actually a little bit warmer than even parts of Sonoma Valley as a result. So we see early bud break. It also means we have a long growing season. We're also part of Carneros, and Carneros is, for me, known for its wind, kind of an extension of the Petaluma wind gap. And every day it's quite windy. It's fairly consistent. 1 or 2 in the afternoon, the winds pick up, pulls our property down. So in the summertime, we also play a little bit cooler than other parts of the Sonoma Valley and or even the Russian River. So the wines that we make, I would say, play towards a more cool climate feel on both their palates and aromatics. For the Chardonnay, it does feel to me more Carneros-like, but our Pinot to me tastes more Sonoma Coast-like. And we're not as far away from Sonoma Coast as could be and still be in the AVA. But I think that's part of where I agree with a lot of the lines that we all agreed to as an industry of where things are cut off. So sorry, I'm dying here with
Sorry.
my nose. And then Sonoma Valley, I would say the reason I feel like it applies here is we also grow a little bit of Grenache. And when I got to Ramsgate, I thought, okay, we're growing Pinot Blanc, Sauv Blanc, Chardonnay Pinot, and Grenache, like from a grape growing perspective and or a winemaker's perspective. It's like one of these isn't going to work. One of these varieties just doesn't seem to fit. It's either the Pinot Blanc or the Grenache. That's where I started. But looking at it, we have a long growing season, and our growing season and our harvest window is 50 days. So we're picking Pinot Blanc at the beginning, and we're picking Grenache at the end. But they both do quite well. So we are getting daytime temperatures that are warm enough to cultivate a grape like Grenache, which is, I would say, a more warm climate variety. And it's doing it well. It's a really beautiful Grenache, and it works really well for what we're doing. So unique place. It's not one thing, it's many things. And as a result, I think we have to come with a very open mind about what is conventional and what is sort of common practice. Because
You're frozen again.
did I freeze?
Yeah.
Better?
Yeah, your picture is frozen.
Sorry.
That's okay. Your picture is frozen, but I can hear you. Then now you're back. Now I can see you moving.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So as director of winemaking, you have your hands involved in like every aspect of the winemaking process. What's your favorite part of the winemaking process? And I think I already know from your history, but what's your favorite aspect of it?
I don't really have a favorite part, honestly. I think what I like about the wine business, and especially from the production standpoint, is it is a cycle. And so even as a kid growing up in Michigan, you're always excited about spring coming because the winters are so long. And then summer is such a short window that you really enjoy the summer season. And then by the time fall comes, you're kind of excited for all things that come with fall. And I think being in a profession that kind of lines up with seasons is really suits me well. So this time of year, my team, we're tasting barrels. We're thinking about 23. We're thinking about what kind of planning we want to do. I love that part. End of February, we're going to start seeing bud break. So we'll get out in the vineyard. We're going to evaluate pruning. We're going to start thinking about what does this growing season look like. I love that. And then we go into our bottling, our spring bottling, finalizing blends, getting all that into bottle. Probably the most stressful part, but necessary. And it's kind of the closing of a chapter, which, you know, that right after a bottling, you feel like this huge relief. It's just like,
Yep.
to the next one. And then I do a fair amount of travel on behalf of the company as well. So getting out and spreading the word about Ramsgate, I'll be doing that in March, April, May. So there's not one thing that I like more than the others. I think it creates a lot of balance in my life, albeit usually very busy. But there's not one aspect that I can't wait for it to pass. It's almost like it kind of runs its course, and it's nice to be done with it and move on to the next thing. But you know, a decade and a half plus into my career, and I'm always excited for spring. I'm always excited for growing season. I usually am the most optimistic right now. So we've gotten the rain, we've got everything pruned, crops coming in. Nothing's gone wrong, so I'm very hopeful. And then we start plotting what the vintage is going to do for us and the wines we're going to be making from it. So always exciting.
Oh, so you're done pruning already.
We are done pruning.
Fantastic. Fantastic. All right. So you've forged relations, and you talked about it a little bit with the Chardonnay, but you forged relationships with like family-owned coopers. And other than supporting small, you had talked about the fact that it's like not the one size fits all for the cooperage. And do you follow that suit with the vineyards also that you're using? Are they typically the smaller vineyards? What's your relationship with those vineyards? Are you walking those vineyards on a regular basis? Are you having control of how those farmers are farming those vines?
Yes, and no, and maybe. It really depends. My favorite word in the wine business and winemaking and grape growing is it really depends. That's what my team always likes to repeat when I ask. Comes back to them. So yes, we have an affinity towards small cooperages, but we work with anyone that works well with our wines. It just happens that a lot of them tend to be smaller producers at the moment. Same kind of is true of vineyards. We work with some larger vineyards and we work with some very small vineyards and everything in between. I think grape growing is especially true where we can work with one vineyard that's 2 acres. We can work with a property that's 200 acres. Both are important. Both are valuable to our portfolio. It's not one or the other. It's kind of, it depends on the situation. But yeah, with our coopers, it's sort of a Pandora's box that I opened 10 years ago, and it's impossible to close at this point. Even if we start working with a new cooper, I'm excited, and also I'm like, oh boy, here we go. When they taste the wines and they're like, these are great. However, would you be willing to consider some 36-month? Or I think in this case, Allier is a nice choice, but Juppy as a forest might be better for this vineyard. And then you're just thinking to yourself, okay, I work with 15 coopers, and each cooper I have 4 to 6 variations. So it becomes not less complicated as it goes on. It becomes more complicated with more variables, but it's something that we welcome. And it's the same with vineyards. So as we understand what we want, it's not necessarily zeroing in and only doing less and more complicated. It's more options with more complication added onto it. So yes, I think there's parallels there. When we make our Sonoma Coast blends, I could easily go to one grower and get all my fruit needs met from one person, and I could be done. But to me, you sacrifice diversity and complications and complexities by doing that. So I prefer to buy a little bit from a lot of people, and it keeps informing us of our style, but it also kind of narrates I think a very nice story of what the vintage looks like from the Sonoma coast or Carneros, depending where we're working.
Mhm. And so with that in mind, let's talk about the final wine I have here, the 2020 Pinot Noir from Los Carneros. So is this also just about to be released?
This is gonna be the tail end of 23, but yes, it's slated to come out.
Okay, so tell us about this Pinot Noir.
So this is also a state. So all three wines we ended up sending you are wines that we grew and bottled separately. With Pinot Noir, that is coming from multiple little blocks around our property. Again, we're sort of a micro cuvee within one site. We have some older vines that were planted in the mid 90s, and then we have plants that they were planted when the business just started in 2011. So some vine age is going into that. Also on our site, most of the soil type is clay. However, there is a section where some of this Pinot is coming from that is gravel. And I find that to be some of the most exceptional Pinot Noir that we work with. It's just a 3-acre section. So type is very different. It's night and day. You can walk through the vineyard and you can go from clay and it's almost like a line. And then on the other side is this gravel. So more, less vigor. The vines are a little bit smaller. The cluster size are bite size to me. They're just like those little Snickers that you get at Halloween. You can just pop it right in your mouth. But make fantastic wines. And then we have some younger plantings that add a bit of flavor and texture. And it's just a very, I find, really appealing wine. 2020 again is our first full year of organic farming. With red wines at Ramsgate, we also incorporate whole cluster. And we also do native ferments on all of our reds. So something that a lot of people do, but we do find that those are both important procedural steps for us. So whole cluster for us brings out some umami, balances well the fruit in Pinot Noir. I find they match really well. With the whole cluster, we're often doing foot stomping beforehand, kind of old school technique. Whole cluster is like spice or salt or pepper when you add it to a dish. A little bit isn't helpful. A lot can be too much depending on the site, not always. So it's a trial and error over a long period of time. However, at our estate, we find 20 to 30% whole cluster is a nice combination, both aromatically and texturally. So the whole clusters also bring some tannin to the pool. So we can sculpt our wines, and the mouthfeel has a little bit more layers than had it not had cluster.
Well, I am a Pinot fan, so I'm excited to try that and share. Well, I guess I have to share it with my husband. Try it.
I won't tell if you don't.
All right, deal. So I was actually, hunting around the website and I saw your tasting room. I mean, oh my God, that tasting room is magnificent. Like that glass door window, I don't know exactly what you call it, because it's not even like, it's not a garage door. It kind of sweeps up this way. I mean, by the bar itself, it is magnificent. And then you have a pond that people can taste with. And then you have all of these different type of tastings, like a sit down tasting, a caviar tasting. Like, so how do people get to you? How do people find Ramsgate? And I mean, I don't eat caviar, but tell us about that caviar tasting. Like, what are you pairing with that? What are they doing with that?
Yeah, I think a unique opportunity with Ramsgate is, we've been talking about our farming and our wine and our passion for doing both well. The nice thing about Ramsgate is we also have this beautiful facility to come and enjoy it in person. It's when, not all brands have this, and we're very fortunate. We are 30 minutes from the Golden Gate Bridge, so we are accessible.
Yeah.
Nice for those who maybe are here for work in San Francisco and want to be able to sneak away and have a great experience somewhere. So I always encourage people to, save an hour and a half or 2 hours, and you can come up, taste with us, have a great time, and then get back, and no one will even know you were gone. Beyond that, yeah, we have some really cool spaces to enjoy wine. I think wine country has become a place where people don't want to just sit down and have a glass of wine or taste of wine and buy wine and leave. They really want to experience where and how we live in Sonoma County, which is an incredible place. So we've tried to tailor experiences for people to do that depending on what they're looking for. So we have your standard wine tastings. We have beautiful spaces around our property. The building was designed in a way that it's a very open air feel. So depending on the season, we can have most of our doors open and it feels like a giant open space. In the wintertime, it becomes a little bit more intimate. We can close them down. We have fireplaces in a lot of our rooms. Different experiences that we offer. Actually, tomorrow we're coming out with, we had a clever name for it. I'm drawing a blank on it, but basically we have an incredible chef that works here daily. And so we're doing a bites paired with each wine in that flight. It's not necessarily a meal, but it can kind of give you a preview of our chef's talents. We also offer the caviar experience that you just mentioned. So we've partnered with Sir Nikolai, a local caviar producer, and that is amazing. A lot of people drink champagne with caviar. We do have sparkling wine, but we find that our Pinot Blanc, our Sauv Blanc, our Chardonnays pair really well with this caviar as well. So it's an exploration of if you are a caviar aficionado of seeing caviar in a different light. And then sort of the creme de creme of what we offer is a seasonal wine and food experience. This is a seated prefixed menu, both from wine and food. And so guests can come 3 times a day, 11, 12:30, and 2, and sit down with one of our wine educators, and basically they narrate and walk you through both the food and wine pairing, but also educate and engage customer the entire time. So it's really a cool experience that you can really get totally immersed in who and what we do. Our chef is usually very close to the kitchen, so she's often out explaining why and how she decided to do this. I think that's really cool. In wine country, food has become almost as important as the wine. What I do like about what we do here is our chef is very, very thoughtful. As a chef, she said it was interesting to come and work here because often chefs make a dish that they're inspired by, and then they have sommeliers or someone to come and select wines that pair well with their food. And she has to work backwards. Here's the wine that we want to pour and share with our guests. Come up with a dish that pairs well with that. And I think it's when you get to experience something like that, it's a very different sensory experience, because I think it often is working the other way around. So we have a chef who's really being concerned about how the food's going to impact wine and not the other way around. So really cool. She was the chef at the Mandarin Oriental Hotel in San Francisco. She's brings with her a bag of very interesting ingredients, very Asian inspired. So it's kind of a play on California cuisine with Asian flair. So really, really fun. She's huge into seafood, huge into gluten-free, vegan. So we are introducing courses that kind of come at it from a lot of different sustainable practices, but kind of an experiment as well. So I find that really, really fun. It is also seasonal, so it's changing with the season.
And they can find all this information on the website, which ramsgatewinery.com.
Correct.
Hey, ramsgatewinery.com. And you guys are also on social media, Ramsgate Winery. And, just go online, schedule a tasting appointment. It looks incredible. And I cannot wait to try the rest of these wines. And I want to thank you for coming on and sharing all the information about Ramsgate and yourself. And so, did I miss anything that you're like, yeah, these people need to know this? Or did you think we covered it?
No, I think we touched on a lot. I think what I always say is, we're a small brand. You're speaking to someone that was very involved, but my winemaking team is also very small. There's 2 full-time employees plus myself. So it's not, there's not a lot of behind the scenes. It's really the craft of only a few people. Where our team is very passionate from production all the way to the front of house, that the people that work in our tasting room are in love with our product and can't wait to share it with people. So it's and being seasonal, and our facility really captures season well, that it's something that I don't care if it's wintertime or summertime, it's different, but really fun to come and see our place multiple times.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me. And I did actually save just a little itty bitty bit of the Chardonnay left to just raise the glass and say slancha, and hope to see you soon.
Yeah. Cheers. Thank you. Thanks for
Thank you.